I'm Will Beardsley from the Process and Faith program of the Center for Process Studies in Claremont, California. I'm talking with Robert Brizee, who is a counseling psychologist and pastoral counselor from Wenatchee, Washington. Bob, we're talking now about what you understand process theology to be and what the center of it is in your living of it and in your thinking about it. How would you begin to help us think about that?
It's a pleasure to talk about it, Will, because it has made a dramatic difference in my life, and I want to start by saying that. The heart of process theology to me is that I have a relationship with a caring friend, God. And in that relationship, God feels every feeling that I experience and offers me new possibilities in every moment of my time, and saves and cherishes every event that I go through. That is very life-transforming to me.
Mm-hmm. Would you think with us a little bit about how this image of God as the caring friend compares with other images that people, especially Christians, have used to think about God?
Yes, I think it's important to make that kind of distinction because there has been a variety of images. But largely, if we look at the biblical or the medieval images, we get a picture of a different kind of God than what I'm saying. Usually it's a God who is a warrior, like the Song of Miriam. The God is a man of war. Mm-hmm. Or there is a palace image in which God is the king. Or there is the image of the courtroom in which God acts as lawgiver or judge. And then there's the primordial image of God as creating everything out of nothing. All of those images carry with them a great sense of power, God's might and power.
We'll follow on that a little bit with how the God who is a caring friend exercises God's presence or power in your thinking now, in contrast to these images of a more harsh kind of power, if that's the right way to put it.
It's a power of persuasion, a power of influence, in which God, as the caring friend, cherishes my freedom, and cherishes my creativity, and desires that I grow and blossom. It's not a kind of power. It's not a matter of amount of power. It's a different quality of power. It's the power of persuasion rather than the power of making things happen.
Bob, the images which you started us with in contrast to the caring friend were mostly biblical images, but also widely used in the history of the church. But now we come down into the modern world, and many people think differently. Indeed, they think maybe that there's no place for God in this modern world.
Indeed.
How do you approach that as a process thinker?
Well, I certainly acknowledge that that is the condition of our day, that many people see no place in a world that works like a machine. I think it was William Paley who said, there is the great watchmaker. And so everything runs like a watch. And what does God have to do when the watch is made or running? God becomes unemployed and unnecessary in this whole situation. God gets pushed out of the picture.
Well, Bob, in many forms of religion today, people kind of bet their faith on getting what they want out of God. Do you want to comment on that
Yes.
issue?
Yes. I think that would be a misunderstanding of the caring friend. If we moved that into a relationship between two people, we would see that as one where I'm going to get from, and God is going to decide to grant or not grant. This is so different than someone as a caring friend you can count on, who's constantly there and is constantly calling you to be beautiful and harmonious and to use your creativity.
Well, I want to press it just a little bit more.
Yes.
Because life is not always beautiful and harmonious. It
Indeed.
has some very harsh moments in it.
Indeed.
Alienation and loss and failure.
Yes.
And say a little bit more about how the caring friend comes to one in those times.
In those moments, I see God as, first of all, experiencing with us, the suffering one who understands. And I also see that whatever our condition, whether we have just experienced a typhoon destroy our home, or we're lying on a bed with cancer, whatever our condition, God will offer us something new for our growth in that situation that's possible for that moment. It certainly may not be where either myself or God would want me to be, but offers hope there too.
So far we've been talking about an individual person and his or her faith and his or her relationship to the caring friend.
Yes.
Can you set this in a little wider framework of our human network and our whole cosmic network of relationships?
Indeed. It's sort of like any friend of yours is a friend of mine. So if we see God as the caring friend, God is a caring friend to not only all of the 4 billion or more people, but to all creatures and all entities in all creation. And so God is acting as that sort of possibility giver to everything. And that's exciting because God becomes the glue that holds things together, or the great web, or the symphony that holds all the notes together. Mm-hmm. I like those kind of images.
I like them too. Where is this a brand new idea, God as the caring friend? Where does this idea come from?
Well, I would say that it is fairly new in one way. That is, I think that the development of science had to come first, especially the idea that all is not composed of things or matter, but rather there are events or happenings or occurrences. That had to await, I think, our 20th century science. I think there's another root that is exciting to me, and that is the words of Jesus. The beautiful parables, like the prodigal, the waiting parent, greeting the wayward one back, or the vineyard owner who has all the workers, and those who worked only a short time get the same as those who worked in the hot sun all day.
So you think of this faith and this theology as bringing together modern science and the message of Jesus.
Indeed.
Do I hear you right?
Yes, and that to me is exciting, because I think some of the faiths of the day would ignore that anything has happened since the 17th century, or they divide it into this scientific world and the world of faith. Science, often that is ignoring or neglecting the whole area of faith. And to me, it's a wonderful, beautiful integration.
Bob, do you want to kind of wrap this up for us now, sort of bring it into focus?
Yes, I would say that what process theology has meant to me, both on the intellectual level and on a level of my daily life, has been that in the universe, at the very center of everything, there is a caring friend who is caring and luring us on to greater beauty and harmony.
Thank you, Bob. That's very helpful. We thank you for talking with us.
My pleasure.
I'm Will Beardsley from the Process and Faith program of the Center for Process Studies in Claremont, California. I'm talking with Robert Brizee, who is a counseling psychologist and pastoral counselor from Wenatchee, Washington. Bob, we're thinking about how God acts in a human life, and you have developed the image of the counsel to help us grasp and visualize how God can be an active part in our life and our decisions. Can you tell us a little about that?
Be happy to, because it's been a very interesting process to develop the image, and it's been very useful in having developed it. It starts out very simply that we're talking about a committee. And any of us who've been active in a church certainly know about committee meetings. We've been to many of them and suffered through a number of them. The idea is first that there is a committee in which there is a beginning of the meeting, and there are people who gather in a circle, and stages they go through, and then there is a conclusion. There is an ending. And the purpose of the committee is basically to create something. Even if the committee struggles or runs into a stalemate or tables the motion, still something is created. And to me, that's an important part of the image.
That's helpful. Now, if I hear you rightly, you're trying to give us an image that will help us understand a decision as an event, and our life made up of a series of events. Is that the way it is?
Yes, yes.
You want to spell that out just a little bit?
So that if we would look upon an hour or a day or a minute, we would see a series of little council meetings going on. One council meeting after another. And when one concludes, there is something finished. And then that council meeting, like in any committee meeting, sends its minutes on to the next meeting. So there's always a continuity between one to the next.
Let's go a little farther into what goes on at such a council meeting in my life or yours.
Well, in that, what we basically have are relationships. If we talk about who's there, my thinking is that at least 5 council members have to be present. There could be 50.
What would these minimal 5 be?
Well, they are a relationship to one's body. Our body is certainly very actively present. A relationship to my own past. I remember things. A relationship to the world's past around me, how deeply we're affected by that. And the present situation where we find ourselves. And lastly, a relationship with God. Those are the 5 that I think enter into and form the mix and the blend of
But
any
we
committee.
could break those down into different parts of my past, or even different parts of my body, I suppose.
Oh,
We wanted
indeed.
to go into that.
Yes.
What I'd like you to think with us about now, though, is we're talking about a committee meeting. That means that my moments of life and moments of formation are made up from several different inputs.
Yes.
But how is God distinctive in this making of decisions and the coming to be of events in my life? Is God just one of the council members like the others, or does God have a distinctive role to play?
Certainly very distinctive in 2 ways. First, that God is constantly present. Other committee members may come and go. One may be very important for a certain day or for even years. God is the constant member of the council who is always there. And God is also the source of possibility. That is, what might be. All the other members represent what is already present or given. God represents who I might become in that moment.
That's this especially distinctive role, that God represents what may come to be, the lure of the future.
Yes, indeed.
Well, tell us how you found this image useful and some of the ways that you've worked with it.
I discovered it largely through my counseling, and I might tell a little background to that.
Please.
In my background training, I have studied the PAC, the Parent, Adult, Child of Transactional Analysis, the subpersonalities of psychosynthesis, and certainly the ego parts or the triparts of the Freudian system. That's always been a part of my thinking. But somehow it came together, and my first rough image was King Arthur's Round Table. Well, that didn't last very long. And then it moved into the council. And then I thought, no, the council implies that that's static. It doesn't change. So I had to move it into council meeting, because that implied there's activity going on. I think the other thing that was exciting for me was to find that it's a part of our ordinary lives. We see it often so in the dramatic and the pathological. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and 3 Faces of Eve, and Sybil, and the others, even in Scripture. My name is Legion, or we are many.
Well, take a few illustrations and just give us a few life situations and show us how you would interpret them in terms of the council image,
Well,
council meeting image.
the easiest one for me, Will, is one I've used most often is you walk up to a cafeteria line and you take your tray and you start moving it down on the guide and you see the desserts first. Now, first
Sure
upon, they know how to catch you, and there are the desserts, and you immediately become aware you have a committee inside. For example, you have the nutritionist or the Weight Watcher, and you have the impulsive desire, and you have the accountant, and you begin to feel those. Another image that might prove more likely for the young family is imagine a husband and wife having planned a weekend away for months. All they have to do is come home, pack the bags, and they're ready to go. They come home and their youngest child is ill. Now we can just imagine the number of committee members that are going to speak in that moment, between the responsible parent and the one who wanted to play, and they just would blossom out before you. Those would be a couple of examples.
Well, I think we ought to ask you then, spell out a little more carefully how one might imagine that God would play a role in one or more of these concrete situations.
Yes, yes. Certainly in terms of the cafeteria, I think God would want us to think about other people, other animals, and the plants, and the whole globe as we're walking by that dessert and thinking about what we might eat. Especially God would want us to think about the health of our own body, and would want that part to speak. I think God would always be present as the one to say, you might become new, you might make a new kind of decision in this moment. But it's taking into account, I think God is always saying, will you love those whom I love? And that's the main part that God would play.
That last comment is very helpful because it takes it out of the circle of my own individual concerns and
Yes.
reminds me that God is leading me into a wider world.
Yes, yes.
Do you have any further comment on that?
I think God is always calling us to be more inclusive, to think more about all of the people and all of the world. And since I see God as relating to each of those in the same way that God is relating to me, we're in a vast network. And so God's task is to call us into harmony with everything.
Do you want to make any comments about how we might come to be more sensitive to the voice of this member of the council in our lives?
Yes, yes. I've come in my own life to just think a simple little question which keeps me in tune, and that is, oh God, what is your vision for this moment? What is your highest possibility for this moment? How would you have me become in this moment? One of those simple little questions, and it really helps guide me.
Well, that's very helpful, Bob. Do you want to wrap it up now and summarize it in any way?
Well, simply that I think the council or the committee has become a lively, alive, ongoing expression that I think can explain so many different kinds of human events. And that's why I like it, because it doesn't seem to be restricted or limited in terms of its possibilities.
Well, you've certainly challenged us to rethink how God is present in our lives, and we thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
I'm Will Beardsley from the Process and Faith program of the Center for Process Studies in Claremont, California. I'm talking to Robert and Adrienne Brizee. Robert Brizee is a counseling psychologist and pastoral counselor, and Adrienne Brizee is a master's level counselor in private practice. They both practice in Wenatchee, Washington. We're thinking today about how process theology comes over into one's work, into one's career. And in your case, your career is counseling. So we need to think a little bit about how the process perspective makes a difference as you go about your counseling.
I would say, first of all, that it does make a difference, and it's a delightful difference. The first difference I'd say is that we recognize that any client we work with is involved in a process with God. And God is offering that person new possibilities in every moment. Our task is to enter into that process.
And I would add to that that my view of how God is interacting with me then informs how I want to interact with that person across from me.
But is there any set way in which you bring this process into focus in your counseling?
Several ways, I would say.
Well, give us an example.
Okay. One would be in beginning by entering that person's world, focusing where they are focused, rather than my deciding where I should enter there, or what I should be doing. I do a lot of listening to start with.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that an important way to enter the process is to look at relationships. If we see God as one of our primary and unique relationships, then we want to look at other places where people are invested. That is, who is this person relating to, and what is this person relating to, and how intensely? That's an important thing to find out.
In most kinds of counseling, dealing with the client's past plays a large role.
Yes.
How do you think about that in the counseling that you both do?
One of the differences probably from a number of other counselors would be that we do not start by spending an hour doing a history or an intake, it's called. We do, as I said earlier, we begin to listen and enter into where that person is at the time. So there's not a major focus on gathering the past information. That would be the first thing I would think of.
Also, I would add to that, while we think the past is deeply important and has a great effect on the person, we also value the future or the potential. And we will be talking with that person and wondering, who might this person become? So while many would focus on what the person has been doing, we would give a lot of weight to where do you want to be in the future, seeing that as a place where God is luring and calling them.
Well, that's very helpful, but I think that one of the difficult things that occurs surely in many of the with the lives of many of the people you deal with is that there's something that they find unacceptable in their past.
Yes.
That sense, something has to be coped with, and how do you come at that?
First, I think both of us would probably begin by gathering enough information just as the person is talking to form a picture of what we might call the parts of that person. And usually, quickly, you hear the part that they are not happy with, they are ashamed of, find unaccepting. And often, in fact, the person will say, I'd like to get rid of that part. Cut that part out of my life. So one of the ways that I specifically would work with that would be to help that person gain some understanding of that part, that the origin of that part came out of a solution to a problem they were facing in their past, and see that it was probably a very good solution, which helps them at least have some understanding and gain some acceptance of that that part's history. Then helping them see that the solution that part arrived at may not be working for them today, but that they can change the manner in which they operate that part rather than get rid of it.
Do I conclude rightly that you both feel that the people you talk to have more potential for change than they usually believe?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
You want to spell that out just a little bit for us?
Well, most people, I think, feel somewhat limited, like they're helpless or powerless. It can go the other way also. Some people feel like I have total freedom, and therefore I can do anything. But more likely we find people who feel, I have little or no freedom. I'm locked in and trapped. And I've been really helped by Delwyn Brown's idea of contextual creativity, in which we help the person to say, within your particular situation, this is the kind of freedom you have. These are the doors that might be open. We help to discover that with the person.
Well, maybe we ought to talk about the other side, since you already mentioned it. You do have some people, and I think we find this in some of the popular self-help books too, where they're promised, you can have it all, you can do anything.
Yes.
What about that?
That does create a problem for a lot of people, in the sense that they don't have it all, or they haven't overcome these problems, and they say, what's wrong with me? And what Bob was referring to in terms of limitations is helping people understand that by being acquainted with their parts and the past of them, it certainly does, our past does have an effect on what's possible today. And so what's possible for me might not be possible for Bob because of the differences in our past, but that does not eliminate possibilities. There are still many for that person.
You want to try to be a little more specific about how process thought shapes your understanding of potential for change. You've already said something about this, both of you.
It has helped us, I think, to develop a model of change which is so different than most people have.
Spell that out in a little bit more detail.
Most people think that, for example, I have been this way up to this point. Now I'm going to always be this way. We have a model that says there are little changes here and here and here and here and here, and they get a little bigger. And our approach has been to accept when they do the old and celebrate with them when they do the new. It's a very freeing model of change for many of our clients.
Mm-hmm. And that brings to my mind, we both work in a practice, not in a church, not in a pastoral counseling center. So most of our clients don't know anything about our faith background, so we're not talking about that with them. But we can take this information or this model, and I might, as Bob is saying, draw little marks on the board and say, these are the 110 million times you've done this way. But today or tomorrow you could do it this way in a new way and begin to build 110 million new ways.
Mm-hmm. It helps us to be very patient, and it helps us to look at the little tiny steps and really applaud and celebrate with people. We become their cheerleaders. We become a member of their committee who is always complimenting them on what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you find as you work this way that your involvement is something you take home with you and you live with it day and night, or is it not that way?
It's not that way for me, and that's a common question. I might take a person home in my mind in terms of puzzling about what is it that I'm missing, or what would I like to add to what I'm doing, but my process vision of God's activity says that I'm available to that person while I'm with them, and God is available to both me and them when we're not together. And I trust that process, and I think that's one of the things that's helpful to me.
I think that's very, very profound.
We also say to people, you may take me home in your back pocket, so that we continue to be a voice through that week.
Yeah.
But we try not to take them home in the sense of being a problem or a worry to us. We'd like them to take us, though.
Well, that's good. Do you want to wrap this up for us, Bob, or Adrian, or both of you?
I could wrap it up in this way, that in January I will have counseled for 30 years. And I am more excited when I enter into my counseling office today than I ever have been in my career.
That's very impressive. How about you, Adrian?
I don't have that kind of track record, Will, but I do enjoy my work. And I think that my faith stance is a background that supports that.
I'd like to add one other thing too. When I walk into my counseling office, I do not have to change my ideas, shift gears. I'm as much a process thinker when I'm out mowing the lawn as I am when I'm in the counseling office, as I am when I'm at church worship on Sunday morning. I can stay in the same world all the time, and it's very freeing and very helpful to do that.
Well, it's evident from talking to you that you both do enjoy your work and find it very constructive. We thank you for talking with us about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.